Hello everyone and welcome to Drivenmad. Now in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I installed my temperature gauge. This is an external temperature gauge, aftermarket, in my L200. Now one of my comments was how I fitted it. So
One of your comments?
Well, one of our comments.
Oh, you mean the talent?
The talent. I thought I'd go through and run through what I did, because I did film it at the time of installing it, but it was trial and error, so the video didn't come out very well. So I thought it'd be better to do an after video and show you a little diagram I've drawn up in my 5-year-old writing of how I did it. So starting off with the actual sensor itself, it goes here. You can see it's mounted between a radiator pipe. So I cut the pipe and attached it on each end. I got this from AliExpress. Now I'm editing it, I'll remember to link that in the description. I got this, yeah I will. It was very cheap and it actually does the job perfectly. So you can see this is the sensor, and we've got 2 wires going off of this. That's just an old bit of coolant from where it was leaking, but I fixed that with PTFE tape. If you install that, put a little bit of PTFE tape on it and it doesn't leak. But you can see here we've got a positive cable. So the cable here runs from the sensor and that goes straight into the gauge inside the car. So the wiring isn't the nicest, but you can see it just runs, it does the job. It runs down here all the way along and into the cabin through the grommet down there. I'll go inside in a minute and show you. And also we've got a ground on here as well. So next to the sensor there's also a negative wire, which is a ground. Now I ran that into the car as well, because this was, as you can see, one piece of wire. Both of them were connected, so I thought I'd run it inside and ground it inside. That's just any ground will work from this one. Now after that we go inside, and the actual gauge itself has 3 more wires on it. So this is my drawing. You can see the sensor, we've got the random earth, which can go anywhere, but in my case it's inside under the dash. We've got the temperature sensor, which is the positive, which goes into the gauge here. Now if your gauge is exactly the same as mine, I'll get some shots of that and insert them now. You can see the back of the gauge. This is how you would do it on a gauge, exactly like this. These 3 are for the sensor, and then there's 2 wires at the top for the lights on the gauge to work. So for the lights to work, it's just a positive to the fuse. I've got a fuse box, and I'll insert a photo of the little fuse jumper. It taps into the fuse. I've got a photo of it there. I used one of them to put the positive, and there's also another positive on the gauge which has to go in, which is from the right hand side. We'll go in and show you in a second. And then all the other negatives go to the battery, so that's nice and simple. So all negatives to the battery except for the one on the sensor, and then we've got the 2 positives to the fuse box, and then the positive wire to the sensor. So if we go inside, I'll now show you. So before we rip it apart, you can see there's my gauge. When I turn the ignition on, you can see the lights come on. So that's what the 2 upper connectors, the positive and negative, were for. So if I put my torch down, I'll pop out this bit of trimlet and you can see. So after you've seen, these are for the LED for the lights, for the ignition. Down here for the sensor, we've got 1 ground here, which goes to the battery. And then we've got 1 that comes in from the sensor, and the other one goes to the fuse box, which is underneath the driver's seat. So it is quite simple, it's just it looks a bit more daunting. So there's exactly 3 cables, 1 for the sensor, 1 to the fuse box, 1 to the battery. That's for the sensor. And then for the actual lights of the car, 1 to the fuse box and a ground to the battery as well. So it's fairly straightforward. Nice and simple install once you know how, so hopefully this will help you. I'll try and draw up this graph, this diagram. I've drawn this up just for the video's purposes. If I don't make it better on the computer, you'll know, because the photo of this exact one will be inserted if my computer abilities aren't very good. But as installs go, it's fairly easy, and if you can see here, I've installed it. This was a cubby, so I used to put my phone in here, but I don't really need it. So what I did was cut out a piece of a plant pot. It was a square plant pot, so I cut that out. I'm going to blame you now. I left Dad to the sanding and painting, but the sanding was a bit aggressive, so if it looks bad on camera, I do apologise, but it's not that bad. I think it looks good. It looks
good on camera.
Yeah,
in fact, it looks better on camera.
In person, does it? So yeah, and it could.
Did I paint that? Then?
Yeah, and I did all the terrible gluing, but the gluing, the fascia in, but it all works actually really well. And long story short, let's move back outside, and I'll tell you why I did it. And the main reason I did this install was because, as most of you probably know who are watching this, I had overheating issues. So I changed the original sensor and whatnot, changed the radiator, changed literally every part of the cooling system I could think of. Water pump, thermostat, housing, thermostat, everything's been changed. And nothing helped it. And then one day I went out at night, turned the lights on, and both of my headlights blew up. I thought, that's a bit odd, to go at the same time, and they were quite new. And it turned out the alternator was faulty and the voltage regulator was the problem. And since I've had that done, the original gauge hasn't caused me an issue. This gauge hasn't caused me an issue. So long story short, if you've got this overheating problem and you've changed absolutely everything, just make sure your alternator's working well, because that's the last thing I'd have thought of on this that would cause the problem. But it was spiking my needles. They were making them go really high. But this temperature gauge is also nice to have because it does tell you in degrees what temperature the coolant's at, where the original one just gives you it's in the middle, it's okay. What temperature is that? I don't know. So it's quite nice to have it in degrees. But hopefully this cleared up some of your questions about how to install it. And if you've got any other questions, drop them down in the comments below, and if they're short answers, I'll try and reply in shorts and in the comments and whatnot. And if not, I'll make another video if I don't explain myself very well in this one. But hopefully you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and me and Dad say goodbye.
Bye.